Hi, my name is Tamara, and you are watching Things Even a Monkey Should Know. Hello, hello! Thank you so much for joining me again today. As you know, if you've watched some of my other videos, I'm not a professional anything except artist, but I have learned there are a number of things around the house and out in the yard and on my cars that I can do myself, and usually save myself time, money, and aggravation, so I hope you have saved those things now too. Well, today should be the final installment in the saga of restoring our sad, saggy dining room chairs. Today we are putting on the fabric and applying little finishing touches. It's going to be fun and awesome. So let's get started. So by now you know the drill. Things that we're going to need today. We are going to need our chair that we've been doing, which in our case is chair number 4. We are going to need a staple gun. And last week I told you that you could use a pneumatic staple gun if you had one available. I would recommend that whenever you're doing your final fabric covering that you do not use a pneumatic one because the staples are too narrow. You need staples that are a little wider. So an electric staple gun is much easier and it does not blow through your upholstery fabric. Let's make sure we have staples for our staple gun. You want 1/2 inch staples. I would not get any more and I would not get any less. These seem to perfectly fit the bill pretty well. Make sure that they fit your staple gun. You're going to need something to draw on your fabric with, so a marker or a permanent marker or pen of some kind. You're going to need something to cut your fabric, so make sure you have some of those sharp new scissors available. You're going to need measuring stuff, and again, you can have either a tape measure or yardstick or meter stick or whatever stick. Even though we know we're perfect and we're not going to put any staples in the wrong place, you want to have something to pull staples out with. You may need to have a little something to help pry them out with. And if you have some plastic tool, even I would get like a plastic knife or something, because we're going to need that to help tuck our fabric around corners. It's really helpful. You're going to need to have a sharp knife, so you can either have like an X-Acto knife like this, make sure you have a brand new blade, or you can use like a utility knife. Again, make sure you have a brand new blade because we do not want raggedy edges on our fabrics. That being said, we need fabric. So you want to make sure that you get a fabric designated for upholstery. I wound up ordering mine online because I could not find anything quite wild enough locally. So this is actually what we are using on my end today. It is actually a marine grade vinyl. I wanted something that was easy to clean up and very durable and that would not fade when the UV rays hit it, because the room that these chairs are in does receive a lot of sunlight. You can of course use regular upholstery fabric. It does not have to be vinyl. Just make sure it's upholstery, because if you use regular fabric, it's going to rip within, say, a year, 6 months. Regular fabric is not designed for this kind of wear and tear. You're going to need a clean towel, clean rag towel, and you're going to need, just in case you have to bump in any of your staples, you're going to need just a little hammer. It doesn't have to be one like this, but it does need to be small. We are going to need our fabric from last week that came off of our chair. So you've kept this, right, this whole time. We don't get to throw this away until this chair is totally done, and then we get to throw it away, and it's very satisfying. You are also going to need a hair dryer if you are doing something that is vinyl or leather or something else sort of plasticky. If you're using regular fabric, you do not need this, but anything sort of plasticky, you do need it. One last thing that I almost forgot to tell you that you're going to need is some kind of black fabric that's kind of sheer. I am using landscape fabric. That's perfectly acceptable, but you can use anything that you would like. First things first, you remember how we used this piece of fabric as a pattern last time for our quilt batting? Well, we are doing the same thing again. We're going to lay it down on here, and we are going to measure and see how much extra fabric we need to add to it. So we want to be sure that we get enough on all sides. And this time, you know, last time I used a blue pen to mark my extra that I needed. This time I'm using pink just so I don't get confused. And it looks like, well, we need a little bit more than last time, I think. So I'm going to add 3 inches on my sides. And in the front, 3 inches would probably be enough. Let's add 4 inches just to be safe. Ooh, the back is tricky. Now look at this. If I cut exactly the way that this is cut, I'm not gonna have enough fabric to go across the back. So I'm gonna add a 1/2 inch right here. Thank you, Jack. And we're gonna add a 1/2 inch over here. And then this looks like we almost have enough, but I don't know. We're gonna still add, we'll just do the same. We're gonna add 3 inches back here. Make sure over on your other sides that everything looks good. I think we've got plenty of fabric on both of these corners. And then of course, we're not going to do the crazy shaped corners on the ones that we'll be folding in. Let's talk for a minute about how to decide or figure out how much fabric you need per chair. Obviously, we can measure what we already had and that will help. But if you're buying it ahead of time before you even take everything apart, if your cushions are staying the same and all your support's staying the same, you're just putting a new fabric layer on, then that's fairly easy. You just measure exactly around the chair, you know, to see, say, how many inches across, and then you add a couple of inches to make sure that, actually we want to do it at the widest point, duh, but add a couple of inches, more like 4, so a few inches, to make sure that you get the width wide enough. So I'm at 31 inches at my widest point across, so I wanted to make sure my fabric was at least 35 inches wide. Then you want to make sure that you measure at the widest point from front to back. So for me, the widest point is going to be 28 inches. Again, add another 4 inches, that's 32 inches. Now obviously, I didn't know exactly how my cushions were going to be, and I ordered this fabric a while back. I made some measurements based on what I had, which came out to 24 inches this way. And then I just decided, you know, just to be safe, I'm going to say 1 yard per chair. So 1 yard per chair this way, make sure it's at least 36 inches this way, and we're good, or 34. Anyway, yard by yard, basically. Always err on the side of getting a little bit extra fabric, just in case your perfect self makes any mistakes. Now, I don't know if y'all can see very well, but this fabric has a repeat that goes, I guess, horizontally this way. And I wanted this area, which would, if this was real alligator, would be like the back of the alligator. I want it to run down the center of each chair. And yes, I do know that that leaves a lot of waste on either side, but I'm saving all the waste for a future project, so yay me. So instead of dealing with a really big, heavy roll of fabric that leaves me with the grand ability to make some pretty spectacular mistakes, I have been lining up my fabric at the edge of my table and cutting a 32-inch piece. I got that 32 inches by measuring across here and then adding what I had added to that chair already. Now that I have my piece of fabric cut, I've decided where I want my seat to be aligned. So keep in mind, this is very important, because if you want something running straight down the center, then this is the time to put it there and to align it there. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I'm going to do basically what I did with the batting, and I'm going to measure a little bit outside of each of these. I'm going to err on the side of too much fabric, of course, because you can take fabric away, but you cannot add it. I'm going ahead and just making my marks there. And again, you can make way more marks to meet so that you can meet your lines. On this fabric, I actually really like this pen because if I happen to accidentally make a line where I didn't mean to, it wipes right off, so that's very handy. They do have disappearing ink pens for fabric, which might be helpful also. So I wanted to add an extra 1/2 inch to these areas right here. I believe that one was fine, but I'll go ahead and add a 1/2 inch anyways, because again, we can always cut it off. And then we're adding 3 inches back here, which just puts us all the way to the back of the fabric. I'm going to speed you up now because you do not need all my explanation over again. Remove your old piece of fabric and go ahead and cut out your pattern. Our next step is to put our fabric onto our chair. You do want to keep your scissors handy because you will very likely have to do a little additional shaping once you get your fabric on your chair, or you may have to cut some little flaps like I forgot that I've been having to do here. So I have a whole bunch of extra fabric in the front because I did not quite cut this as I should have. So if you have something running straight down the middle like I do, you definitely want to make sure at this point that it is lined up exactly where you want it to be so that any alterations you make will only help it, not hurt it. Everything I have is coming straight from this point and goes to that point. And in my case, my fabric only has stretch in one direction. Most fabric should stretch more in one direction than the other, but it should actually stretch both ways. This makes this fabric a particular challenge to work with. You know, most of the time, whenever you're doing things like this, you want to start with a staple in the middle and then move around to each side. Because these particular areas back here, they have been my greatest challenge because this chair goes from larger to smaller and there's nowhere, you know, in the front, we can fold that extra fabric in. Back here, you either have no extra fabric or there's nothing, I don't know, it's just awkward. And also the fact that there's not a double-sided stretch also makes for an additional challenge. So I found that it is easiest to start in the back and actually move to the front. So since we already shaped our cushion, our goal here is not to reshape our cushion. We're just trying to keep the material taut or tight. Give it a little staple and then get the wrinkles out to the best of our ability. See how I'm folding this in, so we have a really nice edge right here, but I am pulling it over and down to eliminate as many of those wrinkles as possible. Now, because I'm having to staple this blind, basically, I will have to go back and pound in some of the staples, but that's the least of my worries right now. So I just did the same thing on that side. I know this looks a little loose right now, but it will help once we get some staples in the front. Again, we are only concerned about getting, hey buddy, how you doing? Oh, thank you. Elvis, this is Elvis, everyone. So we're coming around to this side here. We're gonna take our plastic tool here. We're gonna go ahead and just poke that fabric down in there. And then with this fabric, we want to pull it down and back because we are doing our best to get as few wrinkles here as possible. See what a nice corner that made? So I'm gonna go ahead and staple it here. If any of it tries to creep out, you can just use your little plastic tool, which by the way, this is for prying out the dashboard on a car. It's been really useful for a lot of things though. And then we will turn around to the other side and we will do it all over again over here. Down and back, and we're folding our fabric in, and we're also hooking this back in here. That helps keep the foam and such tucked in back there. And then we go ahead and we pull this tight, down and back. See that? We are going to staple on up here in a minute as well. We need to go ahead and do a little bit in the front here so that we can eliminate some of that bulge in the back. See how we don't have nearly as much slack in the front anymore. And also remember, we only have 3 staples back here, so it's not going to be really tight at the moment. The way that this fabric stretches is across this way. It does not stretch that well the other direction. We are going to wind up with some very mild ripples, which we will shrink out with our heat gun or hair dryer. Let's see if we can go ahead and give ourselves a little help. Know exactly where this is going to go before we attach anything over there. So we're trying to have to take out as few staples as possible and go ahead and do some folding up here. So I just folded the corner under just like we did with the quilt batting. And even when I pull this up and around, see how we still have a little bit of wrinklage left there. But again, we will be able to get that out. So if you go ahead and you fold under your corner like we did with our batting, which is the kind of corners that I have chosen to make, and find out where that's going to go, like where the underneath piece is going to go, you can go ahead and just give it a staple to kind of keep it in place so that we can work on getting this side done, or at least tacked. Once we are finished and we use the hair dryer, we will be able to eliminate pretty much all those wrinkles. So we're going to go ahead and put a slit up the side of this leg, just like we did with the batting. See, the batting was good, the quilt batting was good practice for this. Oh, sounds like things are getting serious over there. So now I can see that I did not put this staple in quite, or I didn't have my fabric situated quite like I would like it to be. And I have accepted that yes, sometimes staples are going to have to come out. So I believe I have it where I need it to be now. And again, some of these wrinkles will come out as everything gets tacked on these sides too. So that is going to help a lot also. If you are using regular fabric, not any kind of vinyl or any fabric that just has one-way stretch, you can actually start from the center on each side and move outward, just like we did with the batting, because you will be able to successfully get a tight edge. So we do want to go ahead and tack our fabric here, mostly because I need to be able to make my corner, and I cannot do that if I do not know where the top of my leg is. So I'm going to go ahead and tuck that under. I'm pretty happy with that. And then just give it a tack. Now we're going to yet again cut our fabric up our leg so that we can tack it up here at the top. And make sure that you don't cut too far, because that would be very tragic. And I'm going to pull down and over, down and over. See? Let's go ahead and see about cutting off our excess fabric here. You want to be careful that you don't cut off too much, because this is your final layer of fabric, although we will have trim that goes on this leg. If you get in a position where your fingers need to be too close to your staple gun, please always use some pliers so that you're not trying to staple and hoping that you're not hitting your fingers. So I did not cut that really well. So this is where your really sharp X-Acto knife would come in, and you would go ahead and make that cut a little cleaner. I'm always a little bit afraid of cutting it too high with the scissors. Okay, That is pretty much right on the line now, which is exactly what we need. So guys, I do not want to bore you to death, so I'm going to speed up this next part, but I'm doing exactly the same thing over here that I did on the other side. If you need to see it again, just rewatch the other part, and if there's anything that I think of that I left out, I will most assuredly stop this and tell you. So now that we have everything more or less tacked where we want it, we're gonna go ahead and do some more like final tacking, which we have to do it all from this side because we're trying to get as many of the wrinkles out as possible. Before we do that though, we're gonna take our fabric glue and we're gonna just go ahead and this area back here that we tucked down into this foam, I'm gonna untuck it a little bit and I'm just gonna put a blop of glue. That is a very technical term. A blop of glue back here to make sure that we don't have a wardrobe malfunction one day, like where the silver fabric comes out. Y'all are being really helpful. And we see some foam because we don't ever want to see a foam. Thank you, Elvis. I'm gonna go ahead and just put an additional staple right here to make sure that this stays put. And the reason that I didn't glue this earlier when it would have been easier to get to is I wanted to be sure. Hey bud, very helpful. You need your own show. Get your own show. I wanted to be sure that I didn't accidentally, or that I didn't need to move this and then we would have glue everywhere and it would just be terrible in general. So now that I know where everything is going, now I glue it and just tuck everything back in nice and neat like it was. Y'all are gonna scare everybody. Please stop that. They fight like this all the time, so don't be concerned. And they're not being mean, they're just playing, and they're very large puppies. And they are totally trying to steal this episode. So now we're just gonna go through, and again, I'm still going back to front just because of the nature of this seat. We're going to go through and I'm going to, hopefully y'all will be able to see this. I'm going to pull this tight as I can. Back to front, I'm gonna staple it, and then we're gonna turn it over and we're gonna tap in the staples. If we find any areas that look like they have too long of a distance between staples, we're definitely going to go ahead and add another staple, because why not? You don't need to overdo, but you also don't want to have wide gaps with no staples. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start pounding in our staples. Hello everyone, fancy seeing you here. Well, as I was sitting and editing what I thought was going to be the last of these upholstery videos, I realized that it's getting a little bit long and kind of goes against my idea of small bites makes big things possible. So I am actually going to end this video right here. We're going to save the finishing touches for one final video on this, and I know it seems like we've been doing upholstery stuff forever, but if I'd smashed it all into one ginormous long video, it would have seemed really overwhelming and not very doable, whereas breaking it down makes it seem pretty decently doable, I think. So thank you very much for coming along on this journey. Thank you very much to everybody who's already subscribed to the channel. If you haven't already done that, please go ahead and do that now. I hope you have a wonderful week. I look forward to seeing you again soon when we will finally be finished with all of these chairs.